Yo, this is Chris coming to you live from the basement, and this is Facts Over Feelings. Look, I took a little time off of work and the channel to be with the family, reset the mind, and just touch some grass, get some fresh air. But I'm back now. And what I would tell you all, if you don't get time off, try to take a day here and there if you can, when you can, just to mentally recharge because it's constant chaos out in the world and everyone needs that time to themselves. But again, I'm back and trust me, we're about to bring the heat today. So, listen, been out for almost 2 weeks. A lot happened while I was out. Diddy got his charges mostly dropped. Elon and Trump are back beefing again. LeBron wants to trade out of LA. Conor McGregor is sending unsolicited content to Azalea Banks of all people. Elon Musk, his grok is racist, also known as Mecha Hitler. It's just crazy, right? Tariffs are back, kind of. And of course, number one topic of the moment, Epstein. But the one thing I want to dive in today is that big, beautiful clusterfuck of a bill that just passed. But before I unpack it, if you vibe with the channel and this type of breakdown, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on alerts, and drop a comment with your take. So, all right, friends, let's dig in. So this bill, sure, some people may have heard about it, some people may have not, but this bill is economic fentanyl with a $2 trillion annual debt hangover and $1 trillion in interest payments before we even talk about what's inside. This bill, the so-called one big beautiful bill, was branded as a win for working families. But the truth, it's a Trojan horse packed with permanent tax cuts for the wealthy, rollbacks to social programs, and a projected $2 to $5 trillion debt bomb. While media timelines are jammed with Epstein conspiracies and headlines that go nowhere, and let's be clear, we all knew the list wasn't coming out. I covered this a few episodes ago. If you don't believe me, go check. But I covered it. And listen, I said I won't give this a lot of energy, but I'm gonna just put it like this. Go listen to Michael Wolff's interviews. Go into the YouTube search bar right after you're done with this. Look up Michael Wolff interviews. Follow the breadcrumbs. And then maybe you'll understand why the list never came out. But anyways, so this bill, the government is quietly shifting trillions of dollars toward the top 10%, while telling the bottom 60%, yeah, hold tight. We got you. Again, if you're wondering whether this all sounds familiar, just wait for what Ray Dalio has to say about this. And listen, if you don't know Ray Dalio, I understand, but you're going to get your first introduction into him today. He's the billionaire founder of Bridgewater Associates. It's literally one of the largest hedge funds in the world, and probably the guy central banks call when they need a macroeconomic reality check. He spent decades studying the rise and falls of global empires, and he's warning that America's on the edge of repeating the same mistakes. Think about that. So let's break down what's actually inside this so-called prosperity package. So, Medicaid cuts. Almost $1 trillion. Close to $1 trillion being slashed, right? CBO is saying 17, 18 million people could lose access. SNAP restrictions. So you got more work requirements, expanded up to age 65. Even veterans and unhoused aren't safe. The largest cut to food aid in U.S. history. And this one right here trips me out because so many people see this as a win, but And I heard somebody say it on a podcast the other day, but easiest way to explain this is, so the tip and overtime tax exemptions, up to $25,000 in income tax free. Think about that. Only 25,000. So we're thinking about a Big Mac, right? The Big Mac itself is the tax cuts. The 25K that people can deduct, those are the sesame seeds on a bun. Right? Great headline, shallow impact. All right. Estate tax doubled. The ultra wealthy can now pass down 30 million tax free. 30 million. Your grandmother's checking account, not so lucky. SALT deduction was restored. State and local tax, this is a big win for high earners in blue states. You get to subsidize some of that property tax. No student loan relief, no renter support, no child care boosts, no green energy credits. Oh, by the way, all of those middle class perks, most of them expire by 2028 when the next president has to come in and figure out what their economic agenda is going to be. But the corporate tax breaks and the state handouts, permanent. It's funny how that shit works, right? Just saying. So listen, I want to zoom out because there's a clip that I want to show you. And it all centers around what happens when the debt in the country gets too high. So let's break this down real quick.
When debts become very large, and there is an economic downturn, and the empire can no longer borrow the money necessary to repay its debts, the financial bubble bursts. This creates great domestic hardships and forces the country to choose between defaulting on its debts or printing a lot of new money. It always chooses to print a lot of new money. At first gradually, and eventually massively. That devalues the currency and raises inflation. For the Dutch, this was the financial crisis brought about by financial excesses and paying for the Fourth Anglo-Dutch War. Similarly, for the British, it was paying for its financial excesses and its debts from the two world wars. And for the US, it's been 3 cycles of debt finance booms and busts since the 90s, with the central bank stepping in each time with stronger measures. When the government has problems funding itself, when there are bad economic conditions, and living standards for most people are declining, and there are large wealth, values, and political gaps, internal conflict between the rich and the poor, as well as different ethnic, religious, and racial groups, greatly increases. This leads to political extremism that shows up as populism of the left or the right. Those of the left seek to redistribute the wealth, while those of the right seek to maintain the wealth in the hands of the rich. Typically.
Does any of this sound familiar? I mean, just think about it. Tell me if this video makes sense so far. Drop a comment below. I want to hear what your thoughts are. But most importantly, does this sound familiar?
During such times, taxes on the rich rise, and when the rich fear their wealth and well-being will be taken away, they move to places, assets, and currencies they feel safer in. These outflows reduce the empire's tax revenue, which leads to a classic, self-reinforcing, hollowing out process. When the flight of wealth gets bad enough, governments outlaw it. Those seeking to get out begin to panic. These turbulent conditions undermine productivity, which shrinks the economic pie and causes more conflict about how to divide the shrinking resources. Populist leaders emerge from both sides and pledge to take control and bring about order. That's when democracy is most challenged because it fails to control the anarchy, and it is when the move to a strong populist leader who will bring order to the chaos is most likely. When debts become very large.
So listen, doesn't that sound like the United States right now? Listen, this isn't just theory. This man has researched the rise and fall of global empires throughout world history. The U.S. is projected to run $2 trillion deficits annually. Interest payments alone are approaching $1 trillion, more than we spend on defense. If you listen to Ray Dalio talk about it, he says this is the point of no return. And this bill, they say, hey, fuck your couch. And they just put the pedal to the floor. You can't just cut social support and give tax breaks to billionaires and keep borrowing forever without someone footing the bill. Spoiler alert, guess who's footing that bill? You. You. And here's the thing. This is where it actually gets disaster, or like real disastrous and dangerous. When you have a bill like this, and I'm gonna play another clip that I'm teeing up right now. But when you have a bill like this bill assumes the US can always borrow. I hear people say this all the time, but yeah, housing values will keep going up. This is going to keep happening. People are still spending. All of these things continue to happen, right? But here's the thing. If you look at the bond market right now, the bond market is starting to sweat just a little bit. So I'm going to roll this clip and I want you to take a listen to one explanation what the bond market is and what it means for us. So let me roll this clip for you.
Bond market. The bond market is the basis, it's the backbone of all markets. It is the risk-free, meaning default-free, probably default-free, interest rate that determines what all asset returns are going to be. And when there is a breakdown of the supply-demand picture for the bond market, you see a certain type of market action. You see long rates rising relative to short rates. You see the currency go down. You see gold go up because there's a movement out of that bond market because there's a supply and demand imbalance. When that happens, that raises interest rates and it puts the Federal Reserve and other central banks in a bind. That supply-demand imbalance, in order to deal with that, when there's not enough demand, they're torn between allowing interest rates to rise and have the negative effect that that has on markets and the economy, or coming in and printing money, essentially, and buying bonds in order to provide the demand for those bonds that aren't there, and that produces inflationary pressures. Watch the bond.
Once again, does that sound familiar? If you don't know, right, what are we seeing? Rates are rising. Treasury yields are spiking. Moody's downgraded our credit rating. And even Jamie Dimon said it. The bond market's patience isn't unlimited. It's not. If demand for US debt dries up, the Fed either raises rates into recession or prints money and devalues your dollar. Either way, middle class wallets get crushed. Your mortgage, your car loan, groceries, retirement, all of it costs more while your real wages stagnate. So listen, while the public is chasing the next Epstein distraction, this big, beautiful clusterfuck quietly sets fire to the fiscal foundation of this country. So let me just make sure we got this straight. The rich, they got permanent tax breaks. You got temporary crumbs. Debt exploded. Interest payments will soon outpace funding for Social Security. Think about that. Interest on debt. Interest on debt. It's going to outpace payments for Social Security. But people always talk about cutting that. In the bond market, the real signal is flashing red. And we didn't even talk about the one piece in here because I didn't want to get into it, but I have to call it out. We didn't talk about the $45 billion being allocated to ICE. Just to put that in perspective, that $45 billion ICE budget has a higher budget than every country in the world with the exception of 4. Who do you think is going to sign up for ICE? What type of individual do you think wants to, let's say, walk around with a mask and not show his badge and just blindly arrest people without actually knowing who they are? $45 billion can buy you a lot of that. Why are we borrowing trillions to make billionaires richer? Why are we cutting food stamps and Medicaid to fund estate tax breaks? Why does no one in Congress talk about how this ends? This wasn't a budgeting error. It was a value statement, and you weren't in it. So here's what you do. 1, share this video. Your timeline needs fewer distractions and more truth. 2, call your rep. Ask them why they voted for this shit. 3, subscribe, turn on alerts, and drop your take below. And 4, cop some merch at FactsOverFeeling.com, no S. Support the mission, fund the message. Listen, justice matters, but attention is step 1. Tonight, we just exposed the blueprint. And this is Chris signing off from the basement. Peace. If you made it this far, you're not just scrolling, you're searching. Hit that subscribe button and share this with one person who actually thinks. And if you're ready to keep pushing past that noise, tap the box on the screen. I'll see you there.